Have you ever noticed how some people, even with similar diets and lifestyles, are more prone to certain nutrient deficiencies than others? For instance, why are vitamin D deficiencies more common in African and South Asian populations? Or why is lactose intolerance widespread in East Asians? This isn't a coincidence. It's rooted in genetics, ancestral diet patterns, and evolutionary adaptations. This video will explore how ethnicity and race influence nutrient deficiencies, supported by recent research and clear scientific explanations. From vitamin D to iron, and from folate to B12, we're diving into how our biology shapes our nutritional needs. To begin with, we must understand the foundation. While race is largely a social construct, certain genetic variations that align with ancestral geographic origin do affect how nutrients are metabolized. Ethnicity, which includes cultural, dietary, and environmental exposures, further influences nutritional health. Scientifically, populations have evolved specific gene variants called polymorphisms that affect enzymes, transport proteins, and receptors involved in nutrient absorption and metabolism. These adaptations often reflected the dietary patterns and sun exposure of ancestral environments. For example, populations in sun-rich areas evolved differently from those in colder, less sunny regions, particularly in how they synthesize and store vitamin D. This field of study, often referred to as nutrigenomics, is at the core of understanding ethnicity-based nutrient deficiencies. One of the most researched examples is the high prevalence of vitamin D deficiency among people with darker skin tones. Melanin, the pigment that gives skin its color, acts as a natural UVB filter. While this protects against UV damage, it also reduces the skin's capacity to synthesize vitamin D3 from sunlight. The process of converting 7-dehydrocholesterol in the skin into cholecalciferol is UVB dependent. Studies, including large-scale surveys like NHANES in the U.S., have consistently shown that African American populations have significantly lower serum vitamin D levels compared to lighter-skinned individuals, despite similar or even greater sun exposure. But the story doesn't end there. Genetic differences in the vitamin D binding protein further complicate this. Certain variants, more common in individuals of African descent, lead to lower circulating levels of bound vitamin D, affecting both storage and biological availability. This has real health implications, including higher risks of osteoporosis, immune dysfunction, and metabolic disorders, particularly when dietary intake and supplementation are not adjusted accordingly. Lactose intolerance is another striking example of how ethnicity and genetics affect nutrient processing. In many non-European populations, the activity of the lactase enzyme needed to digest lactose in dairy declines after childhood, a condition known as lactase non-persistence. This genetic trait is encoded by the LCT gene, while Northern Europeans have a high rate of lactase persistence. Due to historical dairy consumption, East Asian African, and many indigenous populations commonly lose the ability to digest lactose as they age. As a result, individuals from these ethnic groups may avoid milk and dairy, which are key sources of calcium and vitamin D, unless adequately replaced with fortified plant-based alternatives or calcium-rich vegetables. This can lead to chronic deficiencies. Research by the NIH and FAO has shown that these populations often exhibit higher rates of low bone density and osteoporosis. It's directly linked to reduced calcium intake and poor vitamin D status due to both dietary and genetic reasons. Iron deficiency anemia remains a global health concern, but its prevalence is significantly higher in South Asian populations, especially among women. This disparity persists even in countries with sufficient food availability. One of the reasons is dietary. South Asian diets are often high in plant-based iron, which has lower bioavailability compared to heme iron from animal sources. Compounds like phytates in legumes and whole grains, commonly consumed in these populations, inhibit iron absorption. Cultural practices, such as drinking tea with meals, which contains tannins, further impair iron uptake. On top of this, genetic factors contribute to data. Variants in genes like TMP, RSS6, which regulate hepcidin, are more prevalent in certain South Asian populations and may lead to impaired iron regulation. Recent research published in the British Journal of Nutrition also points to specific HFE gene mutations among some ethnic groups that result in either iron overload or inefficient iron utilization, depending on the variant.
Wow.
All of these factors combine to create a perfect storm for chronic iron deficiency, especially among women of reproductive age. When we look at folate and vitamin B12 metabolism, genetic polymorphisms again play a critical role. A well-known example is the MTHFR gene variant, particularly the C677T mutation. This variant reduces the efficiency of the enzyme methylinodoreductase, which is essential for converting folate to its biologically active form. When this conversion is compromised, it can lead to elevated homocysteine levels and lower cellular availability of folate, increasing risks for cardiovascular disease, neural tube defects, and mental health issues. This mutation is more common in certain ethnicities, including South Asians and Hispanics. For example, studies suggest that up to 40% of people of Mexican descent carry at least one copy of the T allele, which significantly affects folate metabolism. This means even with a normal dietary intake, individuals with this mutation may still suffer from deficiency symptoms and often require folate in its methylated form for proper absorption. Moreover, B12 absorption itself can be limited in populations with dietary restrictions, like vegetarians in South Asia, compounding the problem. Understanding how ethnicity and race influence nutrient deficiencies is crucial, not to stereotype or generalize, but to provide more accurate and effective nutritional guidance. This is the foundation of precision nutrition, where dietary recommendations are tailored not just based on age or gender, but also on genetic background, lifestyle, and culture. For years, nutrition guidelines have followed a one-size-fits-all model, but that approach fails to address the biochemical uniqueness of individuals from diverse backgrounds. Health organizations, including the World Health Organization and the National Institutes of Health, are now acknowledging this gap and advocating for population-specific nutrient thresholds and interventions.
Whether it's adjusting vitamin D supplementation for darker-skinned individuals,
considering plant-based iron enhancers in South Asian diets, or recommending active forms of folate in high MTHFRs groups, these adaptations can transform public health outcomes. If you found this video informative, please give it a thumbs up and share it with friends, especially those studying nutrition, medicine, or public health. Drop a comment if you want a second part where we discuss how ethnicity affects responses to carbohydrates, fats, or even caffeine metabolism. And don't forget to subscribe, because the future of health is personalized, and it starts with understanding our roots.